Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Pham and I am a student at the University of Kansas. The topic of my research presentation today is centered around the investigation of brine exchange between Kansas oil reservoirs as an alternative means of produced water management. Brine exchange has been proposed as a method of reusing a portion of the wastewater generated during oil extraction rather than treating it as a waste product and disposing of it. In brine exchange, the wastewater, also referred to as brine or produced water, from one oil reservoir, the Arbuckle in this case, is transported to another reservoir, the LKC reservoir, and used as a substitute for fresh water in a practice known as low salinity water flooding. In return, the produced water from the LKC reservoir is transported back to the Arbuckle reservoir and injected underground to maintain operating pressures. The main benefit of brine exchange over conventional deep well disposal is that the produced water can be used for other utility purposes and the quantity of fresh water consumed is also decreased. While brine exchange may seem like an appealing solution, there are a few potential drawbacks to be aware of. The most significant, and the focus of this presentation, is the potential for brine incompatibility. This refers to the potential for different brines to react with one another when mixed to form solids. This may result in scale formation, which can damage equipment or inhibit oil recovery by blocking rock pores. This leads to the purpose of my study, which is to perform an in-depth analysis regarding the compatibility of two Kansas produced water samples. The goal was to quantify the volume of water which could be reused for brine exchange, as well as to evaluate the economics of a proposed project. To evaluate the geochemical compatibility of the brine samples, a series of mixing experiments were conducted. In the first, Coreflooding experiments were conducted by pumping brine from each reservoir through a limestone rock sample to simulate conditions found in the real world. In the second set, brines were mixed alongside limestone powder to evaluate the geochemistry and reaction rates. For both sets of experiments, the resulting liquids were analyzed for calcium and magnesium concentration, and these measurements were used to determine whether precipitation reactions had occurred. This graph depicts data obtained from the Coreflooding experiments. The main takeaway here is that once a brine is injected into an oil reservoir, very little mixing occurs. Once a low salinity brine is injected, it quickly displaces any brine initially present rather than mixing with it. So, the most important geochemical interaction to be aware of is the one between the injected brine, Arbuckle in this case, and the reservoir rock. These graphs depict results from the bulk mixing experiments between the Arbuckle brine and LKC reservoir rock. As shown here, the concentrations of calcium and magnesium did not decrease noticeably with time. This is a desirable outcome since it indicates no major precipitation reaction had occurred and brine incompatibility is not a major concern. The process was simulated with various thermodynamic databases to see if it would be possible to model the reactions without the need for experimentation. Unfortunately, none of the databases used could match the experimental data very well. Lastly, the economic feasibility of conducting a brine exchange was modeled using a Monte Carlo simulation. The model constructed incorporated construction cost, energy requirements, and revenue from the increased oil recovery. The break-even point is shown here, and it is safe to say the quantity of water transported, as well as the distance between the two reservoirs, play a large role in the economics of brine exchange. To summarize the key findings of my research, incompatibility between the Arbuckle and LKC brines is not expected to be a major issue. Only minimal mixing occurs between the injected and in situ brines. The thermodynamic databases evaluated had difficulty fitting the experimental data, but further investigation is needed to determine the underlying reason. And lastly, the economic viability of brine exchange is highly dependent upon flow rate and distance. With this, I'd like to thank you for your time and urge you to reach out to me with any questions you may have. Thank you.